Hey, this is Enaa, and today I want to review an episode of one of my all-time favorite television shows, James Cameron's Dark Angel. Those of you who don't know, Dark Angel was a show it premiered on Fox about 10 or so years ago. And the basic premise is the main character, Max, who's played by Jessica Alba, was a genetically engineered soldier created by the U.S. government, along with other genetically engineered soldiers, who's brought up in a military compound out in the Northwest and escapes from government control along with several of her fellow genetically engineered soldiers and goes into hiding. Around the same time that she escapes, terrorists set off an electromagnetic pulse above the United States, which pretty much shuts down all the computers and turns the U.S. into a third world country. That's the basic premise. And Max is looking for her fellow genetically engineered soldiers and trying to stay one step ahead of the government. And she's aided in this by a journalist who discovers her identity when she breaks in. And he's a left-wing humanist named Logan Cale, who has a secret identity called Eyes Only, where he'll hack into television networks and expose corrupt politicians, business people, mobsters, and the government. And now, the premise is pretty simple, and the show only actually lasted for 2 seasons, and of the 2, I like season 1 the best. It's got a lot of social commentary, and it really shows the U.S. in this kind of post-apocalyptic landscape. Now, James Cameron, as we all know, has done movies such as Terminator, Titanic, and Avatar. And I personally think I thought Avatar was slightly overrated. I tend to actually like Dances with Wolves much more. But I think James Cameron has a lot of talent in him, far more than, say, Steven Spielberg, and certainly far more than George Lucas. Let's just say the Star Wars prequels were probably some of the worst movies ever made. That being said, this television series has a lot of commentary, and the truth is, a lot of this episode, C.R.E.A.M, it's not heavy on the show's mythology. Essentially, the daughter of a disappeared crusading journalist, we're not sure if he was murdered, missing, or what, and he is trying to find her father, and she goes to Eyes Only, via computer and all this, and asks, "Can you help locate my dad?" And it turns out Logan, Eyes Only, had worked with her father, Nathan Herrera. And Logan is very anxious because they were friends, it was a mentor-protege type relationship. And he's asking Max, "Can you help me out and get the police file on the disappearance?" And Max she breaks into the police lab, she gets it, and there's some cool action scenes there. And if you like seeing people get beat up, it happens there. And there's all sorts of this investigating back and forth. And eventually it turns out that she's able to find Nathan Herrera, and it's actually turns out he had purposely disappeared and gone away with his housekeeper, who he had fallen in love with. Essentially, he eventually meets with Logan later in the episode, and Logan's kind of upset. Like, why would he abandon the struggle? Crusading for the greater good and all this. And Herrero says to him, "Well, I just want to live comfortably. My daughter and I didn't get along very well, and I didn't really want, I didn't think she would really care if I was missing, and I didn't want to die," because he mentions at one point the library there, and he played chess there with someone who had been killed by police death squads. And Logan is kind of upset, and he's described by Max in the episode as a lefty humanist. But you can tell he takes his beliefs very seriously. He's got security, and at one point he offers Max a gun to help her. And because of her upbringing and the fact that she was trained as a soldier, she's kind of squeamish on the whole guns thing. So Nathan is actually, Logan is able to convince Nathan to meet with his daughter, and it turns out that the daughter, and spoiler alert, the daughter had actually been bought off by some mobsters or something. And, well, they plan a bomb at her father's house and kill him and his lover. And Logan pretty much figures it out. Max is sent. She confronts the daughter on the train, who has actually a briefcase full of cash. And Max asks, well, why'd you do it? Was it you hate your father or just for the money? And the daughter says, both. Max, during a brief scuffle, the briefcase comes open and most of the cash flies out because they're on a train and there happens to be an open door. I'm not sure how that, but... And Max is like, well, at least you'll have your hatred. But it turns out Nathan had actually been sitting on some old files about a corrupt police commissioner, and Logan is able to, and he'd sent that to Logan, in thanking him for getting him meeting with his daughter and perhaps back in the struggle. So Logan hacks in and displays about how the police commissioner who's up for election is actually a murderer. Now, there's a beat plot in this episode, and that is about Max's co-workers. Max works at a delivery service called Jam Pony, and it's a very diverse crew. Max herself kind of looks like a little of everything: Hispanic, white, black. And at Jam Pony we got a black man named Herbal Thought. We have a white guy named Sketchy, who's the focus of the B-plot. We have a lesbian black woman named Original Cindy. And Sketchy is one of the co-workers there. And he's kind of a lazy goofball. He's trying to impress the women at work. And their job is not the best. It doesn't pay that well. And Sketchy's doing some work on the side. He's a courier for some mobsters. Well, he's taking money from one and delivering it to another, and it turns out that during one of his attempts to oppress a local woman with his bike, he skids and the money gets lost. So now he's down 15,000. He gets beat up, and he turns to Max and Original Cindy for help. And they actually, because Max is genetically engineered, she has a great memory, great reflexes, and she's like able to count cards. None of the other characters at this point in the story know this. So they actually go to the mobster who he'd lost the money from, and he runs a casino, and they're able to scam from the tables and at poker, and they're kind of getting their way in. They're dressing in very tight outfits, very revealing. And they're playing dumb when, of course, they're working the whole time. They make the money back. They give it to Sketchy. He pays off his debt, and he doesn't get killed. Now, the B plot seemingly has nothing to do with the A plot, Sketchy versus Nathan. But actually, it has everything to do with it. This episode is called C.R.E.A.M, and it comes from a saying of Original Cindy's at the very end called, "Cash ruins everything around me." Cash. The profit motive, the commodity fetish. Accumulate, accumulate, as Marx said. And cash, it's this whole motivator, this whole society we live in. Sketchy said, I'm a budding capitalist, and I saw an opportunity for advancement, and I took it. Well, you take that opportunity, sometimes, actually probably most of the times, you're going to get burned. And you can see what cash ruins around. Max and Original Cindy have to degrade themselves in these tight-fitting, revealing outfits that, and have... that women are revealed as objects of lust and power. And it just shows you the degradation that cash can bring. And Nathan Herrero, a crusading journalist who is trying to do good, when he's rankling the cages of those in power, those with wealth and money, he's getting death threats. People are putting out hits on him. And, he wants a normal, comfortable life, and this is something that happens to many reformers, revolutionaries. They opt out of the struggle. So when he actually pokes his head back up, he gets killed by his daughter, who had been ruined by Cash, by the promise of a reward to track down her dad. He gets killed. And Logan, he's very much, in a sense, he comes from a wealthy family. He's trying to use his family wealth for good, obviously. But Logan, in a sense, to protect himself from those from power, you can see he hires security guards. He's willing to offer Max a gun, to kick ass and take names and all that. And you can see how this whole profit motive is working in this episode. It's a really great critique. And I think Fox probably told Cameron to tone it down in Season 2, because Season 2 became much more Monster of the Week types stories. There were some good episodes, but it was a real drop in quality. There was also this episode, of course, it hints at the relationship between Max and Logan, who they have this sexual tension between them, and it's hinted at very well by the actors. I believe the two, Michael Weatherly and Jessica Alba, are actually engaged at one point. But you really get a great critique, and often during the show, it wouldn't be so much corrupt business people they would go after, though I think there were a few episodes where they did. It mostly be mobsters, but you can see by the way it's worded and acted that these mobsters are portrayed as little different from business people. Maybe that was a way Cameron had to do it to get on the air, but it's a really great critique of society and pretty much how cash degrades people. Now, the show, again, you don't really have to have followed the mythology to really understand this episode. It pretty much stands on its own. And now, again, the U.S. in this series is portrayed as a third world country. We can argue it kind of pretty much is. It's in an economic downturn. It wasn't when the show premiered. And the police in it are portrayed, say, as like El Salvadorian police, or think of the worst aspects of British control in Northern Ireland. It pretty much looks like that. And you can say what you want about the setup, but I really think this episode works. So this is Enaa. Until next time.